Old powers waken, shadows stir. An age of wonder and terror will soon be upon us. An age for gods and heroes.
The glass candles are burning, and you're listening to the Obsidian Nights podcast. Hello, my sweet summer children. Welcome back to the Obsidian Nights podcast, where we go through A Song of Ice and Fire and other books later, chapter by chapter, diving deep into the text and going over the foreshadowing and what's to come, and just like having a conversation about our favorite thing ever. So if you want to join me for an episode of Obsidian Nights, you can contact my my Discord moderator, at Nim's Shadow on Twitter, or on my Discord server, and she will schedule you for an episode of the Obsidian Nights. The Discord server link is in the description box. If you are listening to this on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, Google, please leave me a review and let me know how I'm doing. Reviews really help your girl out, and it helps more people find the podcast. So in today's episode of Obsidian Nights, my special guest is Hannah the Conqueror. Excuse me.
Hi, Gray.
I was going to say, I'm so glad you could come. And would you like to let the people know who you are and where they can find you?
Yeah, guys, my name is Hannah. You can find me on Twitter at HSmiles. I hang out, I talk a lot of politics, so if you're not into that, be wary. And then A Song of Ice and Fire. Those are pretty much the two things I talk about the most.
Awesome. So let's just jump right into the chapter. So in the last chapter, I did John 3 with Rentware, and we were at the wall. It's snowy and cold and raggedy. John's miserable. And now we are 2,000 miles away, 2,000 miles south in King's Landing. And the South is like a very different place. It's a decadent lifestyle. The climate is different. The fashion is different. It's royal. And Ned Stark is just like a fish out of water. And Ned is like just as miserable there as Jon Snow is at Castle Black.
Yeah.
Like, Ned Stark arrives at the Red Keep. He's sore, he's tired, he's hungry, and he's irritable. He wants to eat, like he wants to soak his old bones after that long ride to get there. He wants to sleep, but Grand Maester Pycelle has called a meeting of the small council.
I love this part with when the steward comes in and asks for Ned's presence at his convenience, and it's clearly like the most inconvenient thing ever. Like, I just rolled in from this thousands of miles journey.
Right. Like, he doesn't even want to. Like, he's kind of like, it'll be convenient tomorrow.
Right.
But he doesn't want to start off on the wrong foot with the small council. Like, Ned's clothes haven't even arrived yet.
Right.
So he has to borrow clothes before he can attend the meeting. And the whole image of Ned Stark walking into that council meeting hungry, dead tired, in borrowed clothes, while everyone else is like rested, full, sitting in a room, relaxed.
Talking about their fashion too. Like, they've all dressed pointedly for this meeting, and he's like in borrowed steward's clothes.
Right. And they're like all surrounded by all this royal decadence, and in he comes. And it's like so indicative of like Ned Stark's situation in King's Landing. It's so on the nose with like how he's always going to be a step behind everyone and not really on par with the other players in the Game of Thrones. Like, he's never on equal footing to them. He's always like behind the curve,
3 steps ahead of him, and he's just arrived.
Yeah, and they're kind of like assholes because they know he's tired. They know they shouldn't be having this meeting now, but they're like testing him, in my opinion. Like, they're seeing what they can and can't do. And I wish he would have just told them to fuck off.
Right. To me, that was like the biggest theme of this whole chapter is political tests. Like, literally from the first paragraph, he's tested. And then, like, as soon as he walks into this meeting, it's test after test after test. Like, they're just poking at him.
Yeah, they are. Like, it's kind of like, see what we can do with this hand. We knew what we could do with Jon Arryn. Now we have to see what we can do with Ned Stark.
Right.
So when Ned Stark comes in, we get like the introductions to the Small Council, which the Small Council are, in my opinion, the major players in the Game of Thrones. Renly, Varys, Grand Maester Pycelle, and Littlefinger. And they all, besides Renly, kind of live pretty long lives as far as players in the Game of Thrones go.
They live through several kings. I mean, Varys and Pycelle have already served several kings each.
Right. And you know that kind of is a foreshadowing that they aren't good people, because good people like Ned Stark, they don't live long when you play in the Game of Thrones. If you're not good at the Game of Thrones, you're going to die.
Ned like goes in thinking, like, especially Pycelle, he has respect for him. He doesn't like Varys, but I wonder if that's more related to who Varys is as far as being a eunuch.
Yeah. I mean, not only was Varys, like, is it because he's a eunuch, I also think it has a lot to do with Ned maybe distrusting that, you know, he used to work for Aerys Targaryen.
Right, but so did Pycelle.
Yeah, that's true. And so did Barristan.
Yeah.
But like Barristan and Pycelle are kind of like a little more understandable because they're sworn to their jobs. Like, you're sworn to be Grand Maester and you're sworn to be a guard, but Master of Whispers is something different. And then like you're a spy, so like your whole character is kind of shady.
Right.
And you know, I was thinking when he said, I don't trust Varys the most, I'm thinking like, well, personally, like, you don't have a reason not to trust Varys.
Right.
Like, but you do have a reason not to trust Littlefinger.
Right. But he like, well, I mean, he doesn't trust Littlefinger. I mean, Varys and Littlefinger's first thing they do, Varys brings up Joffrey on the King's Road, and then Littlefinger brings up Brandon and Catelyn.
Yeah. So yeah, correct. He doesn't trust them. I mean, and he shouldn't trust anyone. I mean, I guess he could trust Renly, because I feel like Renly kind of has his brother's best interest at heart for a while,
for as long as they serve him.
Yeah. Another thing, I think there is a lot of symbolism in this chapter. Like George R.R. Martin is really good about that, especially with like the scenes that he paints, like the king's chair being empty and Ned having to deal with all of these snakes like behind the 8-ball and everything. That's kind of like the whole thing. The king dies and Ned has to figure everything out.
I was wondering too about the sphinxes in the small council chamber.
Mm-hmm.
It like kind of really like hung with tapestries from Norvos and Cohor and Lys, and a pair of Valyrian sphinxes flank the door, eyes of polished garnet smoldering in black marble faces.
Do you think that's from House Targaryen? Like, it's...
I'm assuming, but I'm wondering like why a sphinx, like, instead of just a dragon? Like, is it supposed to be kind of a dragon human?
Maybe. Well, Crowfood's daughter, Amanda, shout out to her. She has this very interesting theory about Azor Ahai, and it has to do with the sphinxes and the dragon having 3 heads. Yeah. So I wonder if the sphinxes were something that House Targaryen enjoyed. Like, were there sphinxes in Valyria?
I wonder. Yeah, that's a really cool thought.
Yeah, like, it's like that's the thing with these books. Every time, because I never thought about the sphinxes, you brought that up. Every time you reread something, reread a chapter, reread whatever, you find something new. Yeah, every time.
Most recent read through, I've been noticing sphinxes more for some reason. Like, I never have before, other than the Maester Aemon, the Sphinx is the riddle, not the Riddler. Like, that's the only thought about it I'd had, really. And then I've noticed they're sprinkled in everywhere, really.
Yeah. And there's probably more to it because that's how George writes.
Right.
So one thing I thought that I wanted to talk about when we talk about this chapter is that we learned that Stannis has left and went to Dragonstone,
Right.
which I have serious beef with Stannis over that. Like, I know a lot of people in the fandom love Stannis, and I like him, but he knows his brother is in danger. Like,
he just disappears with
he
no
just
word.
dips on him. And Robert hasn't been the best brother to Stannis. And he's even a worse king. But, like, at the same time, this is the man, like, Stannis is the man that preaches about being just and doing your duty no matter the cost.
Right,
So,
which is, like, really makes his self-righteousness later, like, really grinding about him being the rightful heir. But you were actually in a position to do something about this stuff, and you left.
yeah, you did not care. So it's kind of like, come on, man. Come on. So that's what I was thinking, like, when I looked back at it, like, how can we forgive Stannis for leaving Robert out there to be slaughtered like that when he knew what was up? Like, Stannis knew. Stannis had been talking with Jon Arryn.
Right. I mean, he was doing all of the research with Jon Arryn, the investigation about the bastards,
So is it just is he that mad that, like, I agree Robert should have gave Stannis Storm's End. Like, I agree with that. But, like, are you that mad that you're going to let your brother die because he gave Renly Storm's End? Like, because that's what I feel like.
Yeah, and he becomes just so emotionally short-sighted because of that. Like, there is a bigger political game. He could have actually made himself a legitimate heir if he'd stuck around in King's Landing.
Yeah.
And just waited for Ned to arrive, because it's a whole new political circumstance with this new Hand of the King.
Right. If Stannis was there when Robert died, Stannis was who was going to take the throne? Stannis would have had Cersei and her children locked down.
Well, like, Renly has that plan, you know.
Yeah.
Like, let's take the kids.
Exactly.
Like, Stannis probably would have agreed with Ned. I feel like, no, we can't do that while Robert's still alive. But, like, literally as soon as Robert's dead, and he would have had people, like, posted outside of Robert's door to know the second he died.
Yeah. He would have, like, say what you will about Stannis, like, he would have, if he had been there, none of the story would have went down how it went down.
Right. It still would have been, like, an interesting story, but
it wouldn't have been the same.
No.
There would have been no Joffrey's rule in King's Landing.
Yeah. And a lot of Ned's, he makes a lot of really stupid, especially, like, this chapter just kills me because people, like I said, are testing him so constantly, and he, I guess, is just so thrown off that he doesn't know how to process any of it, because he just makes the stupidest political mistakes with these people.
Yeah.
Like, their motives are pretty obvious, and he just doesn't grasp them at all.
The problem with Ned Stark is that it's not necessarily like he's the problem. It's more of the people that he's dealing with are the problems, because he has this strict moral code.
Right.
And he projects that onto other people that don't have that shit.
Right.
They have no moral code.
I wonder if Stannis had been around, because, like, him and Stannis have that more icy demeanor, you know.
Yeah.
I wonder if he could have related to him more. Hey, like, I know this isn't how you play the game, but everyone else is playing this game, so you have to kind of maneuver in it. I
would have lived for Stannis and Ned Stark linking up.
Right. I think they would have really been friends.
That'll be a good fan fiction. I would read it. Oh, I loved this quote by Littlefinger. It says, "I should have thought that the heat ill suits you, Starks," Littlefinger said. "Here in the South, they say you are all made of ice and melt when you ride below the neck."
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, Littlefinger brings up Brandon immediately.
Yeah.
And that's literally how Ned's dad was killed. Like,
by fire. Melted. He was melted. And, like, to bring that up.
Yeah.
To the Hand of the King, like, Ned should have been like, if it was Tywin would be like, if you make a comment like that again, I will have your tongue out. Or he would have just took it out.
Like, he gets that like, he doesn't like Littlefinger, but it doesn't seem to hit him that this is a pointed remark about his parents, which I have a whole theory about Ned, but
it's like I know it's not a book thing that Littlefinger says, quick tempers, slow minds, but I do believe that is a Stark thing. Like, it's not that they don't joke. They don't make jokes. They don't, like Ned says in his first chapter, like, it's so cold up here, the laughter freezes in your throat. So they don't make jokes. They don't get quips. They don't like, what they say what they mean, and they mean what they say. So when, like, this thing that Littlefinger, like, it's a quip that Littlefinger's doing, is sarcastic, it's a jab at him, he doesn't even get it.
Right. I wonder though, okay, so I have this whole theory about Ned not actually being Ned.
Go off, let me hear it.
So it like started this little thought in my mind a while back during a reread of one of Bran's chapters, whenever he's like on his journey north, and some of the mountain men talk about the Ned, and at another point you hear Mance called the Mance, and how like this is more of a title for whoever is ruling, not the person's actual name. And Ned Stark would be the Stark of Winterfell. So so like whoever is ruler is the Ned right now, until whoever we know as the Ned is gone.
Oh, that's interesting.
But it's not actually Ned, it's the Ned that they say.
So it would be like Ned Stark really isn't Ned Stark, he's really just the Ned.
Right. It's that's where my thought like started with it, where this isn't maybe Ned.
So who would he be?
Well, I mean, I would think either Benjen or Howland Reed, but
ooh, spicy.
Yeah. Those are the only three. The whole Tower of Joy, like, memory that Ned has, fever dream memory thing that he has, like, he doesn't even remember Howland in it. He remembers it really weirdly. I don't know. Or,
I mean, like, it's an interesting theory.
But like, also Ned has this weird thing where he, like, Arya's character she like portrays different characters throughout her story, and she like shifts into them as her personality. Like, she's still Arya, but like inside of Weasel or inside of Cat of the Canals, or, you know, like, she's still there but in this other person. And Ned kind of does a similar thing, where he goes from being just Ned to being Lord Stark. Bran has, like, in the first Bran chapter, there's this quote where he says he had taken off father's face, Bran thought, and donned the face of Lord Stark of Winterfell. And like Ned's whole thought process, like, sometimes he thinks of himself as Eddard Stark. Like, in this chapter, like, it says the first line, Eddard Stark rode through the towering bronze doors of the Red Keep. Like, that's from his point of view. He's thinking of himself as Eddard Stark, as the Lord character. But then, like, other times he shifts back to thinking of himself as Ned.
So that, could he be like a Blood Raven controlled character, like?
I don't think that. I think it's more along the lines of whatever happened at the Tower of Joy and the whole secret thing. The most convenient way to keep that a secret would be to have, because Ned had his own life too. He had his own love interests, all that jazz.
Wouldn't Robert recognize him?
No, not if it was like a glamour or some sort of disguise. Like, clearly whoever it is looks like Ned Stark.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't ever thought about that. Like, I've never, this is the first time I ever heard that theory.
Like, I think that's one of the reasons we haven't seen Howland Reed. It also, like, the only person that thinks that or uses the term son for Jon is Benjen.
That's crazy. So basically, Benjen and Ned could have swapped spots, or Ned could have died at the Tower of Joy.
Right.
No, somebody would have had to swap spots with him.
Exactly. So either Ned Stark is hanging out in the north of the wall as Benjen, or in the neck at Greywater Watch with his wife.
Well, hey, Ned and Ashara. Ned and Ashara. I think Chloe would probably like that from Girls Gone Canyon. So,
it also goes with his whole, like Ned grew up in the Eyrie with, like, other lords and lord sons. So he, like, was in a very political environment for all of his formative years. But whoever this is in King's Landing is just so politically dense. Like they've never been around this sort of thing, but we know that Ned has.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I was thinking like that he's just been so far removed from it for so long, and there's like so many warning signs that he shouldn't go there. And then when he's there, like even sitting in that room with that council, he's saying like he knows he shouldn't be here.
Right.
But he's there.
But why does he stay?
I don't know. I don't know. That's the $1 million question we have to ask George.
I think he stays because he thinks that is what the Ned should do. That's what I think.
I like it. I've never heard it before. I need some time to process it. You dropped the bomb on me on the podcast. So I wanted to talk about the reason the small council is conveyed is because Robert wants to host a tourney to celebrate naming Ned Stark.
Yeah.
Hand of the king. And Ned doesn't want that shit at all. Like, Ned is like, damn him.
And he's mad that, like, it's in his name.
Yeah, like, that adds insult to it.
Oh, yeah, that was another thing with him, like, switching in and out of, like, the Ned and, like, his just weird switching of first person to third person point of view, like, internally himself. Whenever he's, like, talking, he's reading the command for the tournament, and it says, Ned broke the wax with his thumb and flattened the letter to consider the king's urgent command, reading the words with mounting disbelief. Was there no end to Robert's folly? And to do this in his name, that was salt in the wound. Like, he's thinking about himself, or thinking about something like this tournament's doing is in Ned's name, the hand's name, but he thinks he's doing it in his name, like as if it's someone else. And
spicy.
His is like italicized in the book as well.
Oh, that's that you need to like make an essay with all your evidence and put it out there.
I'm working on report writing. I haven't written a paper since high school, so.
Oh, you can do it. You can do it.
I'm working on it.
You can do it. So the tournament, though, they want 40,000 golden dragons to the champion, 20,000 to the man who comes second, and another 20 to the winner of the melee, and 10,000 to the victor of the archery competition. So that's 90,000 gold pieces. And we find out that they broke.
Yeah, well, I thought that was hilarious because Ned is like just mystified by this amount, 90,000. Like, he thinks that's a ridiculous amount of money. And then Littlefinger nonchalantly just tells them that actually we're 6 million coins in debt. So
right. And most of it is owed to the Lannisters, which it has to make sense to Ned at this point. Like, okay, well, yeah, so we're in debt to the Lannisters, and that's why Robert is kissing the asses of these Lannisters.
Right. Well, and then, but the funny thing about that is we found out later that the Lannisters themselves are completely broke.
And no wonder.
So who is the kingdom really in debt to?
Lord Tyrell, the Iron Bank.
Yeah.
And we found out, like, when Aerys was king, the coffers were overflowing. So Robert got the throne with like tons of gold. It was a surplus. Even after a war, it was overflowing. And Robert has drank and hoarded the realm to shit.
I wonder who his like original master of coin was, because like I bet Littlefinger uses capitalist, like, you know, he uses he borrows money for profit to use on like profitable ventures and stuff like that, raises taxes, all that jazz. But like whoever was master of coin before, I wonder if they just like didn't work off the net present value of money theory, I guess. I don't know.
I have no idea what they did, but I kind of believe that like Eris wasn't spending money on like late, like I'm sure when he was younger, but like later when he went to madness, he wasn't probably spending money on feasts and balls and tournaments and things like that we know. Like he wasn't spending money on these extravagances.
Right.
Because he was crazy. He was all his money was going to the alchemists and shit.
Wildfire. Littlefinger is introducing capitalism to Westeros. Like, that's what he has done since he's become master of coin.
Yeah, so if you need another reason to not like him, there you go. Let me see. The Ned kind of reflects on the Arya Sansa situation a little bit, about Sansa blaming Arya about Lady's death, and Arya is really upset about the butcher's boy, Sansa crying herself to sleep, like, and Arya just like brooding all day.
It amazes me how like different these two children's perspective on the world is, like coming from the same family. And like every Stark child really does have a completely different perspective than each other one.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of times you see the family members have a similar point of view. Like all the Lannisters, you know, have a very strong foundation and family power.
Yeah, like I think it has a lot to do with being in like different circles. I mean, they're in the same circles. They had the same teachers, but Sansa is the firstborn child.
Right.
So she's beautiful. So she's raised from the instant that she's born to be a lord's wife.
Right. And it's a very, like the Starks are starkly primogeniture. So her being firstborn girl makes her more valuable of a marriage, like,
yeah, definitely,
piece than Arya.
Yeah, and then Arya is kind of like, she looks different than her siblings, and she relates so much to Jon, and I love that little wolf. Yeah. I love Arya.
You have like also they like Sansa plays by what she's been told the rules are, and like her issue with Arya has always been about how Arya doesn't play by the rules, but like the rules work for Sansa, and the rules don't work for Arya.
Yeah, it's like Sansa is like really obedient,
right?
And Arya just isn't.
Right.
And
Arya's Arya.
Yeah, Arya's just Arya, but at the end of the day, Sansa's obedience has kept her alive, and Arya's willfulness has kept her alive.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that all of these children come from the same home, and they're so different, and they have so, like, not even just different, but like their core values are kind of different, like what the things they value. And it's usually not like that. Like if you come from a home like me, I have 2 brothers and a sister. I feel like all of our core values are the same. Like we're very different people, but at our core, we've been raised the same, we've been taught the same things, and we value the same things. So like it is a drastic dynamic in the Winterfell household.
Like they have a very nebulous like value of family, but even that's pretty degraded compared to a lot of the other families, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it is.
They're wolves. They're like cutthroat.
Yeah. So one of the, like, I feel is the best part of the chapter is when Littlefinger takes Ned to see Catelyn.
I love how he like introduces it. He has like a like very good call out to the cask of Amontillado.
Ooh, explain.
What is it? Like, he comes upon Ned like after leaving the council meeting, and he says, or like, this is not the way to my chambers, as he's like, Ned's following him, and he said, did I say it was? I'm leading you to the dungeons to slit your throat and seal your corpse up behind a wall.
I'm telling you.
And then that's like what he does, basically.
That's what he does. And his, like, Littlefinger's sarcasm, Littlefinger's snarkiness is not to be taken as sarcasm, as a joke, as snarkiness. He means the shit that he says. It's
so layered, too, because, like, he's not doing that in this moment, like, where he brings it up.
And, oh, no, not in the moment.
Like, immediately, at least.
That's his long-term goal, though.
I'm just going to tell you my long con out front, and that way by the time we get there, you don't remember it.
But everything about Littlefinger, like, even when he's talking to Ned, like, he's snarky, he's sarcastic, he's jokey. His eyes glitter with amusement. Like, everything is, like, snaky.
I picture Littlefinger constantly with like a Mona Lisa smile, like.
Yes. Yes, that's crazy. He in the other joke he told him, he was like, "You are a hard man to fool, Stark," Littlefinger said with a smirk. Like, he's just like the whole time just like reading him.
Yeah. Like, Littlefinger does not let up with Ned. It's constant testing him, poking at every sore spot he can find.
Yeah.
I think it's really weird. This chapter, like, not a lot of like action happens.
Yeah,
but then,
it's not.
Again, so much happens in this chapter. Like, Ned arrives. There's like this council meeting. You hear about the hands tourney, and then like, he has to go to this brothel to meet Catelyn and find out about all the deal with the Lannisters. Like, for him, so much happens.
I mean, it does. So when we get to first I want to say a lot happens in the background. Like, it really, like, it's not action. It's nothing big is going on, like you're saying. But like, we're getting this setup of all these big players and people, and all these plot points are starting. And it's like, when you look at it in hindsight, there's so much going on in the background.
It's like, this chapter is really where Ned arrives on the game board and the game really begins.
Yes. And then Ned gets pissed off at Littlefinger because he's like, "You brought me all this way to take me to a brothel?" And Littlefinger's like, "Your wife is inside." And he says, that's like, it was the final insult. "Brandon was too kind to you," Ned said as he slammed the small man back against the wall and shoved his dagger up under that little pointed chin beard. So, like, Ned had enough of his shit.
He's like, "You've been poking me this whole time. I literally just got here from thousands of miles of journeying and haven't slept, had this whole meeting, got insulted by my king, and now you lead me to this brothel."
Yes.
I love the way he writes, like, the scene, too, like, the setup for it.
Like, them getting there?
Yeah.
And it being, like, a maze?
Yeah, you see Ned's, like, looking around, and he's like, what's happening? Just, like, taking in all the details. And then finally, the one detail that really sets with him is that red lamp. And he's just like, oh, hell no.
Ned Stark is not a man to visit brothels. So, Catelyn is inside waiting for Ned. Ned comes in. Let's see.
What does he say? What does Littlefinger say to him? "Perhaps you could fondle a breast or two just in passing." Like a hint.
Littlefinger is an asshole. I don't like Littlefinger, but his character like is funny, like Tyrion.
He's definitely like someone I would want at parties, you know?
Yeah,
like,
he's fun at parties. So basically, Catelyn comes there and fills Ned in on all of the details.
Yeah, and it gets framed like her telling Ned about the story. Like she wants to give him the information, but everything has been framed already by Littlefinger. So the way he's going to be receptive to it would be different if she had like actually gotten there and been able to tell him about it first.
Yes. One thing when Catelyn is telling Ned, one thing that really stuck out to me is when after Catelyn tells him the stories, Ned says, "What was it that Jon had said when they found the pups in the snow? Your children were meant to have these pups, my lord. And he had killed Sansa's. And for what? Was it guilt he was feeling or fear? If the gods had sent these wolves, what folly had he done?" And I totally believe that the gods, I believe someone sent the wolves to the Starks. Was it Bloodraven? Was it the Children of the Forest? I definitely think someone sent them. It's too on the nose for it to be like just a coincidence.
Right. Especially the Jon Ghost parallels.
Yeah, the Jon and Ghost parallel. Even the Arya and Nymeria one.
Yeah.
Like it's just too on the nose, and everything that like so far that we've read about Bran from Bran 1, 2, and 3, Summer is totally like his spiritual guide. And I think Ned is regretting what happened at the Trident, and Sansa winds up having it really bad.
Yeah.
She has it really bad in King's Landing.
This is like his own personal foreshadowing that he has kind of screwed over his daughter.
Yeah. It really is.
There's a lot of interest.
But basically what they need is proof to take to Robert. They need to find some proof. And Ned is like, we have proof. And Littlefinger's like, this dagger, like, this isn't proof. It cuts both ways. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I think it's stupid. Like, to me, I would have just went to Robert, said, when you left my house, somebody tried to kill my son with this knife.
Yeah. And that's what I meant about, like, Littlefinger framing the situation. Because I feel like that would have been, like, that was Ned's reaction. Like, that's what he wanted to go do is, hey.
Yeah. Robert. And another thing that kind of pissed me off was, like, that Catelyn Stark had went and told Littlefinger about Jon Arryn, what Ned suspected about Jon Arryn's death. Yep. I was like, bitch, why did you tell him that? Because I feel like she has more reason not to trust Littlefinger than Ned. Like, sure, you grew up with him. You remember him as a child when y'all grew up in Riverrun together. But the last time you saw him, your fiance almost killed him. And then he wrote you a letter. You didn't respond to it. You haven't talked to him since then. Like, he's went around the realm saying he slept with you.
Well, she doesn't know that yet, but...
Yeah, she doesn't know that yet. But I just don't see why she has no caution towards Littlefinger. I mean, she does, but then again, she doesn't. And she
doesn't
gives
until she sees him, and then, like, I think the emotional connection just kind of overtakes her logic.
I guess because she is, like, smart enough to tell Ned, like, Robert's not the same man that you grew up with. And I'm like, bitch, neither is Littlefinger. Like, neither is Peter Baelish. Like, what are you doing?
And even that kid was kind of sly and shady. So why do you think this man you haven't talked to in forever is any better?
Let me see. Lois, where should we go next? I'm trying to think.
Whenever, like, Kat is about to tell Ned, like, she's talking to him about how she arrived in King's Landing, and she mentions that Varys has some sort of dark art, like knowing how things happen. And just, like, to her, surveillance seems to be dark arts, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, to everyone, they look at Varys as like he knows magic or some shit. Because and that's kind of like how it was back in the day. Like, women were called witches because they knew something about herbs, or because they could, like it's I feel like it fits that time era, that medieval time, where if you just knew a little bit more than someone else, you're a wizard or some shit.
Right. But then like you also have these layers where like Varys actually hates magic, but there are types of magic like what he does.
Yeah, like glamours and things like that.
Right.
And also spying, because the children use their trees to spy on people.
Right.
Oh yeah. So basically, Ned is kind of like preparing for war, sort of like he feels like there's going to be a war. And Catelyn, it's kind of scary to Catelyn. But Ned's like, it might not come to that. And I don't know.
He gives her like all these very specific instructions.
Yeah.
Which like then she does not ever apparently like transmit to anyone. Especially like the Theon part stuck out.
Oh yeah, the Theon about like we'll need his father's fleet
from this day.
Like, instruct Lord Manderley to strengthen and repair all his defenses at White Harbor, and Theon Greyjoy, we're gonna need his father's fleet.
Which like Lord Manderley does strengthen his defenses at White Harbor,
just on his own though.
Right.
But basically they left. The chapter ends off and it's like, if I find proof that the Lannisters murdered Jon Arryn. He felt Catelyn tremble in his arms. Her scarred hands clung to him. If, she said, what then, my love? That was the most dangerous part, Ned knew. All justice flows from the king, he told her. When I know the truth, I must go to Robert and pray that he is the man I think he is, he finished silently, and not the man I fear he has become. And Robert is not the man that Ned thinks he is.
No, not at all. I think that's really interesting that Ned frames it that way too. Like, the man that I think he is, not the man that I once knew.
Right. And he has this fear that Robert is someone else now. Right. And his fear is more accurate because Robert is someone else now. Like, a lot of Robert's interaction, like in chapters with people, is so sad. Like, he's so miserable. He doesn't want to be king. And I know a lot of people, like, they hate on Robert and they really uplift Rhaegar Targaryen as like this hero or whatever. And I really feel like Robert gets a raw deal because Robert, whether it was like toxic masculinity or whatever it was, Robert really liked Lyanna.
Yeah.
And she was taken away from him, and it was kind of petty that he just like started this whole war. But he didn't really start the war because of that. Like, there's a whole sequence of events that happened.
Well, and you gotta think, like, Jon Arryn is probably the driving force behind starting that war.
Yes. And he was the driving force.
And those are the big players.
And it was like Aerys killed Lord Rickon Stark and Brandon Stark.
Right.
So there's like that whole thing too. And Robert is kind of just like this guy that wants to drink and fight and fuck, and then they want to make him king.
Right. That's like basically Jon Arryn doesn't like Aerys or like a lot of the High Lords don't like Aerys. They want him out. They conspire and use these two wards in this bad situation to like get him off the throne, but then they basically push Robert into it. I mean, I think he would have been happy being like a general for the king or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I feel like he gets a raw deal. Like, no, like people, like, I like his story. I like Robert, and I feel so bad for him when I read his chapters and like he just wants to run away and he just hates his life. Like I understand why, if you feel that way about your life, that you don't care about your kingdom, that you don't care about anything, that
Whenever he says that stuff, I'm just like, it would be better for you and everyone.
Right. But I totally get it. Like, I would be the same way. Like, okay, let's just whore around and get drunk or whatever. I don't care about anything, because it's like he doesn't have a choice. Right. He doesn't have a say. And like, I mean, imagine he's in this relationship where his wife hates him and he hates her. She's had
he could change things. He is the king, but he doesn't have enough like knowledge of what it really means to be the king.
Right.
He hasn't been raised to be a king.
He's like what happens like if a drug lord becomes a president or something, like, you know what I mean? He's like, he has no clue.
Exactly.
No clue.
He's a lord.
And I think Renly kind of like said it to Ned in the show, and I really like that when he was like, Ned was like, I'm gonna, like, Stannis is the heir. And he was like, Stannis is a proven warrior. He was like, Robert was a proven warrior. Do you still think proven warriors make good kings?
Right.
Like, there's a difference between being a warrior and winning a battle than actually ruling.
Yeah.
And the only reason Robert has lasted so long is because of Jon Arryn.
Yeah. Who got taken out.
Who got taken out because of Robert's foolishness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is that why?
Well, I think it's because, like, because he was onto it.
Littlefinger's the one that actually killed him, or Littlefinger and Lysa.
Yeah, I think it was because he was onto Cersei.
Yeah. Well, I guess because he was gonna send their son to Stannis, so.
Yeah, and they weren't having that.
Yeah.
But basically, that is Eddard 4. Do you have any things that we missed that you want to add?
Oh, that I found the thing I was talking about, foreshadowing with Sansa. Littlefinger actually warns Ned or warns Catelyn that she can't go talk to the girls, and he says that children talk. You can't do that. And Ned agrees with him there, but then later he tells them all of his plans to get rid of them.
Right. And then you know what happens after that? You don't get out of you don't get out of King's Landing. But yes, so that's Eddard 4. I love this chapter only because, like, I love every chapter, but I love this chapter mainly because of Littlefinger. I feel like Littlefinger is kind of the star of this chapter.
Yeah.
He really stands out. His humor really stands out. His sarcasm really stands out. And his political prowess really stands out.
I feel like this is one of the most Littlefinger heavy chapters you get too, until like Deep in Dance.
Yeah. Or maybe
like a couple of scenes with Tyrion, but
yeah, and like I don't know. Yeah, I mean, because most of I really love the Elaine chapters.
Yeah.
And I feel like I love how Sansa is like coming in. Like, everybody knows I'm not a huge Sansa fan, but when she gets in the Vale, she really starts to bloom.
Yeah. Well, she's finally realized that the rules don't really work for her either. So
yeah, she's changing up the game.
Yeah.
And I feel sorry for Littlefinger.
He's gonna take her away, I think, but he's gonna be the one that has to pay the most because she's waking up. Yep. His long game's not gonna work out for him.
But I want to thank you for coming on. Would you like to let the people know where they can find you again?
Yes, find me on Twitter. It's at HSmiles.
All right. I want to thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next week.